So the topic is enabling AI, modernizing the tech stack. And I think, what an important topic this is. A really remarkably important from the perspective of setting the right foundation. I think that oftentimes people think of AI, it actually reminds me of mobile technology in some ways, where there's a hope with this new wave of technology that it might clear away some of the issues that need to be resolved or the modernization activities that need to be put in place. And just as was the case 15, 20 years ago with the advent and growth of mobile technology, likewise with generative AI, setting that foundation is remarkably important. There's no silver bullet, there's no palliative that it should not be viewed as a palliative, rather. And so this conversation, I think, is very timely from that perspective. And so I'm really excited to welcome a distinguished panel that includes Amar Maletira, the Chief Executive Officer of Rackspace, Marcello Damiani, the former CDO of Moderna, now an investor and senior partner in Flagship Pioneering, and Chris Nardecchia, the Chief Digital and Information Officer of Rockwell Automation. Join me in welcoming them, please. Excellent. Well, gentlemen, welcome. Great to see you all. Thank you so much for spending time on this very important topic. And Amar, maybe we begin with you. You mentioned yesterday you've been in role as Chief Executive Officer of Rackspace for about 11 months.
Yep.
You've been with the company since 2020. You joined as President and Chief Financial Officer. You've been a CFO multiple times over prior to that at Viavi and at HPE before taking on your post at Rackspace. You also mentioned that across that 11 months, you've met with 100 customers. And so no doubt you are seeing all flavors of readiness for generative AI and the innovation to come, people that have, in fact, set the right foundation, others that have not. And especially given that breadth of perspective, would love to have you share some of what you're seeing as sort of constituting what AI readiness from a tech stack perspective means.
Yeah. So thank you very much for having me here. And you're right, I think I've met a lot of customers. As I mentioned yesterday, we also launched this program called FAIR, which is Foundry for AI by Rackspace. About 75 days ago, we are talking to about 400 plus customers and a lot of qualified leads. And so we have a good perspective of what's going on in that space, both from a technology perspective as well as holistically from what's going on from an organizational strategic perspective too. AI, we had both, from Boeing as well as Hitachi, big companies talking about they have been using AI. A lot of companies have been using AI for a number of years, and so are we, right? We are known, in Rackspace, we are known for automation. And we have been using AI for the last 7-8 years to automate our core operations on how do we manage and operate workloads for our customers. And we spent, for the size of a company, we spent about $1 billion, and we automated, we automated up to 12 million lines of code and used machine learning, et cetera. But what we are seeing is, what appears right now is, the emergence of AI, and especially generative AI and conversational AI to transform and how enterprise will create value. The opportunities appear limitless, right? But the challenge here is, with any emerging technology, right, going from, say, buzz to creating business value is not a path which is simple and straightforward. So as we go and talk to our customers, we advise CIOs, CTOs, and CDOs that you have to approach AI readiness holistically. That includes strategic aspects, organizational, technical aspects, very importantly, security aspects, as well as cultural aspects. So, there's a lot of talk going on around strategic aspects and technology aspects. We covered that here today. Security aspects should not be underestimated. That's why we believe that AI is a workload that is a net new workload that didn't exist before. I'm talking about generative AI and other forms. And that workload will explode. And that workload will not be operated, in our opinion, in enterprise data centers. Mm-hmm. Because it's very hard for customers to go build a GPU and CPU farm, right? So those workloads, we believe, should be operated in public and private cloud. And so security comes along with it. So it's important to keep that in mind. The organizational aspects of AI readiness, I would say, is underestimated, right? And I would like to highlight about 3 things. I know we're talking about how to modernize tech stack, but this is important. One is, it is important to create a clear policy around the do's and don'ts of using AI. It sounds simple, but it is very complex to go implement, right? Because you need to prevent the worst and harness the best in AI. So it's very important to create those policies. Number 2, it's also important to create a clear framework for governance and compliance so that you can govern a secured, sustainable, and more importantly, ethical deployment of AI. And number 3, and I would like to highlight this because this was also mentioned during the earlier conversation, is you have to drive improvement in AI literacy in your organization. And that doesn't just mean your technical folks. It's across the board. So for example, and we believe, and I'm sure many of you sitting in the room, is Gen AI and conversational AI with the foundational models, et cetera, will impact every single business function and every single industry. Unlike other emerging technologies like, even if I look at quantum computing or even, Web 3.0, which might impact pockets of industry. So driving AI literacy, absolutely very important. We did that at Rackspace 60 days ago. We said, hey, let's get our frontline customer-facing resources AI ready. Then it dawned on us, it should not just be frontline, it should be everyone in the organization. And we created a program, and I'll talk about that later. We put an audacious goal saying 80% of our 6,500 employees should be AI ready by the end of the calendar year. We put tracking mechanism. We have dashboards every week that comes to me. And I'm very pleased to say that in 60 days, 63% of our employees are AI ready. What does that do? It basically teaches them on a responsible deployment of AI and use of AI. But more importantly, we are starting to see huge number of use cases come from grassroots level. And that's something that we thought was fascinating. And by the way, the organization that led the AI readiness was HR, which was 100% ready, and they beat all the organizations. Second was legal. And we have a number of use cases coming from there that we are trying to deploy.
Fascinating. Marcello, I'd love to turn to you if I may. Marcello spent time at Motorola. He was the chief information officer of a French in vitro diagnostics organization called Biomérieux. And for 8 years, until early this year, he was the chief digital and operational excellence officer at Moderna. Joining in 2015 when it was about 100 people, barely any revenue. In 2022, it was north of 19 billion in revenue. 8 years later, just remarkable the growth. So you had seen scaled organizations prior to this one. You joined very much a startup when it came to Moderna. It strikes me a lot of the work that you did, not recognizing, of course, that COVID would be coming and that your organization would be literally on the front lines in terms of helping save lives and the existential tasks associated with that. But of course, the very important aspect that artificial intelligence, the role it would play in speeding up that process as well. Talk a bit about how you thought about maintaining an appropriate tech stack in order to ensure the organization could achieve the levels of growth that it ultimately did.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So to answer the question, first of all, I would have to say that in my prior roles before joining Moderna, I was tasked to do a major IT transformation. And every time I went to do that transformation, it wasn't IT. It was IT plus the functions. Supply chain, finance, HR. So you had to really look holistically at the organization and what it needs to do. So what we wanted to do in Moderna is avoid all the things that we've seen in prior lives and avoid them. And we were very deliberate and systemic about our approach on what we should be building. And we were a startup, so 100 people, very easy to build from scratch. And we had defined some very simple guiding principle that everyone can understand. So when you talk about the tech stack, If you start talking technology to executives, they get lost after 2 minutes. You tell them about AI, they really excited about it, they want it, but they don't know how to go about it. So I summarized this in few pieces. First, you build the foundation with the cloud. Then you look at your data, and this is internal data, external data, and how you integrate all that data so you can use it appropriately in the organization for decision making. Then all the automation that you need to put in place. This is the automation of workflow, physical flow, whatever you can. That will generate data as well. And once you have this in place, you have a wealth of data that you can use. First, for just simple data analytics, because many organizations need basic data analytics before they jump into AI. And the last piece of the pyramid is AI. And today, of course, at my time, there wasn't generative AI. But now you can add on top of that to accelerate the whole cycle is generative AI that is coming. So this is how we went about building the building blocks. And we were very, very systemic about it and build it like this. So.
Yeah, very interesting. Chris, turning to you. You, roughly 6 years ago, joined Rockwell Automation. Unlike Moderna, which was recently founded, this year Rockwell celebrated its 120th birthday. So storied history, and harkens back perhaps to Vijay's comment about having some technology from across the time, at least of your tenure, and certainly beyond, probably some museum-grade technology as any organization would have. And so would be curious, going back to the beginnings of your journey, some of the important steps you took from a tech stack perspective to ensure that a sounder foundation was in place, ultimately enabling the innovation to come.
Yeah, so you're right. I joined almost exactly 6 years ago now. And what any transformation about at its most fundamental level is building organizational and technology-based capabilities that can serve you in the near term and then are building towards some future state where you're trying to improve the customer experience, trying to redefine what your product offerings are to the market, and do that at a lower total cost of ownership over time and continuously improve it. So given that kind of agenda and that line of thinking, there was a lot of basic kind of things that needed to change. So the first was with the people. Right, so we like to start with the people first, of saying, how do we have to shift mindsets? How do we have to take a more agile mindset, growth type of mindset? So then follows the process, and then kind of last, and in our case, it was kind of in parallel, the technology that needs to be reached. So we were doing a lot of things at once, of transforming the IT organization while we're trying to transform the company, and we're doing all these things at the same time. But it's people, process, then the technology. And in the people aspects and these organizational capabilities, putting in some basic capabilities of learn by doing, agile kind of framework, lean portfolio management, a results delivery office so that we can execute and deliver capabilities in an incremental fashion and have measurable outcomes. The days of you lock hundreds of engineers in a conference room and deliver an ERP 4 years later, and then everyone's disappointed. Those are done, right? So you've got to continuously add kind of capabilities, to the organization, and it has to be meaningful, and people need to see the progress. So, I could go on and on because it's been a 6-year journey that we're not, through yet, right, as a transformation. But those are kind of the fundamentals, the people, process, technology, and these kind of learn by doing kind of mindsets.
Yeah, and the journey, in some ways, there's no destination to it. It's an ongoing journey of transformation, of modernization, of ensuring that the people, process, and technology are continuing to modernize accordingly. Staying with you for a moment longer, if I may, Chris, now that you have a better foundation upon which to build, what excites you in terms of opportunities related to generative AI, pilots I know that you're starting to embark on, and so forth? Some of you know my history, right? I came from a very, a nice industry in biotech, and I had spent 25 years in life sciences. What excited me to come to Rockwell 6 years ago still excites me today. There is so much opportunity with the data that's sitting in our industrial customers and unlocking that. And now the technologies are becoming much simpler to deploy.
So unlocking all that data and all that insights and all the improvement that can happen is just still, at the forefront of my excitement, because there's a lot of work to do and there's just a lot of possibility. So that art of the possible is there. And at Rockwell, we talk about expanding human possibility through these technologies, and generative AI is like the perfect kind of thing to unlock that, right? So if you think of, I'm super excited about generative AI, not only at the enterprise level where we're working on abstracting some of the complexities that we've all built in our organizations over 120 years and bringing it up into a simplified layer. So you just think about your transactions in an ERP system. That's not a fun interface, even with the more modern interfaces, right? So generative AI, you can abstract on top of that. Now you forward that into a manufacturing domain where operators have to interface with different technologies when they're moving from the front of the line to the back of the line, that are panels from this company, SCADA systems from that company, OEM equipment, and now you can layer things like generative AI to where now things become command driven. Show me my OEE on my equipment line. Give me a scenario where if I need to produce 50 more thousand widgets or 100,000 more cookies, what would that look like? Tell me the energy balance across the line. These will now be questions or prompts into it and abstracting all that complexity. That's super exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, that is transformational to the nth degree.
Yeah, very interesting. Vijay and I both participated 2 Marches ago at a remarkable conference that Chris hosted, which sort of showed off a lot of the innovation that was happening. It was incredibly immersive and so on. It's remarkable in a relatively short amount of time what you've enabled there, Chris. Amar, going back to you, if I may, how should technology leaders approach creating infrastructure that's AI aware, as well as AI applications that are infrastructure aware?
That's a great question, because that's our motto. At Rackspace, we say we will help you to build infrastructure that is application aware and build an application that is infrastructure aware. So when you take a look at AI, Gen AI, it's only 3 layers, right? We all talk about infrastructure, we talk about data, and talk about application. A lot of discussion around data, and data is, if you don't have the right data and the data architecture, et cetera, you can build whatever plumbing you need. And if the water doesn't flow, in this case, the data, there is no point, right? So the data is key, but I will talk about infrastructure and application. I think the way to approach it is very simple. You got to ask 3 basic questions as you approach this. It's all about doing your AI workload analysis upfront and asking these 3 questions. Number 1 is, are you going to use, when you think about AI, it's training the model, there's model inferencing, and then there's managing that model and managing the workload on an ongoing basis. So you have day 0, day 1. Day 0 is when you're training the model. Day 1 is when you're implementing the inferencing. And day 2+ is when you're actually managing that workload going forward. So as you look through this chain, you have to ask 3 questions. Number 1 is, are you going to host and build your own foundational model that is closed to your organization and use enterprise data to train the model? That's the first question, because depending on the answer to the question, you will build a different kind of infrastructure. Number 2 is, if you're not going to use a closed model, are you going to use an open foundational model, and are you going to go external, which is Llama 2, et cetera, right? And then use your enterprise data to go train it. Again, depending on the answer to that question, a different infrastructure. And finally, it's all about inferencing. That's where most of the workloads will run. So then if you have to build an inferencing model, then in that case, where are you going to run it? You might have trained the model in public cloud using all the tools. Once it comes in and you deploy it, you might deploy it in a public cloud, private cloud environment. And I sincerely believe, of course, it's not a plug to what Rackspace does because we're a multi-cloud solutions company, but I do believe you have to understand the security framework, right? You have to use the principles of zero trust architecture as you go build it. And there's no better place than doing it in a hosted private cloud environment with all the security architecture around it, or in public cloud. And I do believe that will answer the question on how you'll build your application-aware infrastructure and an infrastructure-aware application.
Very interesting. Yeah, thank you for that, Amar. Marcello, actually, something I neglected to mention with regard to Marcello, he's part of a still relatively exclusive club, but a growing one, of former chief information officers, digital officers who've become partners in venture capital firms. And it's really been a fascinating journey to see a number of CIOs and DOs make this transition to investing and advising startups and so forth. It's been really interesting over dinner to hear more about that journey for you as well, Marcello. I wanted to ask you, you talked about the necessity to ensure this is not just an IT or tech and digital part of the organization transformation, but something that engages the broader company. That requires educating them, bringing them up to speed, ensuring that the organization has a common foundation of knowledge such that there's a better means of taking advantage of the technology. And I wonder, as you think about the agility necessary to experiment with the innovations centered around AI and Gen AI more specifically, what are some of the ways in which you've helped prepare organizations, whether it's the ones you're now advising as a board member and an investor, whether it's Moderna in recent years? What are some of the steps you took from that perspective?
Yeah. So I'll go back to data. In life science, in our industry, data is not native. So people need to go through experimentation to produce the data. In some cases, you have large amount of data, but in some cases, you have small amount of data. So you need to prepare the organization to be able to generate this data, but as well go outside and collect this data in an appropriate way. So what we've done at Moderna and what I'm helping the many companies in the VC is how you structure the organization, how you structure the infrastructure to be able to use that data appropriately. In some cases, the AI model don't need large amount of data. They need diversity of data and quality of data. And people don't understand the differences. They think if they have a huge amount of data, but if it's the same type of data, your outcome will be poor. So what we've done, I give the example of Moderna because this is where I was just recently. We built an AI academy. So we did an AI academy where we trained, like Amar is doing, we train every single individual in the company around what AI is. For people, AI is a black box. They're afraid of it. They don't understand it. They don't know how to deal with it. So what we've done is we sat down with the organization and worked with them not only on AI, but what do they need to produce to be able to use AI appropriately. And AI is not one AI. It's multiple flavor of AI. So we worked with them on use cases, and among those use cases, we started triaging the use cases for the different AI that they should be using. And this can go to a simple data analytics, or it can go to basic linear regression, or it can go to deep neural network and now generative AI. So we have a huge amount of training that went into the organization. And based on this training and use cases, we worked backward really to implement what is needed for those people to be able to achieve their job and use cases. Whether this is in the automation of the data flow, on the quality of the data they need to generate, or on the algorithmics that they need to use to analyze the data. So this is how we really mapped it. And we were systemic, as I said, deliberate about really implementing digitization everywhere. So we collect the data or we use external data, integrated, automated analytics, AI. So that's how we've done it.
Very interesting. Chris, I wanted to ask you about the technology organization requirements in the world of AI. What sorts of changes are you seeing from that perspective in order to bring life to what you've described?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit at the beginning. Is certainly there's a shift in mindset, and a talent kind of upskilling, hiring for people that have this background, that have an architect mindset, have a data science background, machine learning backgrounds. So that kind of talent piece is there. The underlying technology stuff is easy, whether you're doing it at the cloud or the edge, that kind of component is kind of there. So I don't think I need to talk too much about technology capabilities that you need to have, but certainly having, what I talked about before, agile instantiation, and that wasn't something that existed at Rockwell. It exists at many startups because that's how they run, but we had to kind of build all that capability in. So I think those, the skilling, the talent, being very targeted in the talent, and then these methodologies to be able to move quickly and a learn by doing kind of framework was important. I'd say the other aspect is a little bit to what Amar and Marcello talked about, is the way that we do the education is we have these communities of practice around our data and analytics capability around AI, where we're bringing the power of the whole organization. I mean, Rockwell has 120 years of innovation, has a lot of smart engineers. That's a good thing and a bad thing, right? They can get super creative if they're left to their own devices. So we create these communities where they can come and experiment and people learn from each other, and we then can extend the capabilities of the whole organization. So I think those kind of thoughts, and then bringing in outside perspectives with hackathons and that sort of thing, and introducing that kind of concept so that it's not just, hey, this is what we've always known. Those kinds of things of building those kind of technology capabilities that have helped us move forward.
Can you double click on that for a second? I know this is something, having participated a little bit in one of those hackathons, you've thought really substantially about the broader ecosystem of bringing in the community, of course, your strategic partners, and it's a team sport here. It's not an individual sport by any stretch of the imagination.
It absolutely is, and there multiple objectives with that. Number one, inject some outside thinking into this storied company. Number two, getting closer to the community. Number three, branding, right? Because if I surveyed the people in this room, you'd probably have about 3 people that know what Rockwell Automation does, right? And that's not uncommon, right? They remember us from our old aerospace days and all that sort of thing. So part of it was branding and getting closer to different communities, having more diverse candidates involved. So we do a lot of things in those venues, right, with the local community and then national societies. And I think that's kind of important to just bring in those other perspectives into the fold.
Yeah, very interesting points.